Yeah, and the good thing is, if everybody on Earth was a skilled remote viewer, lying would be impossible. Lying on this planet would be impossible.
Boom. Well, that's something we can unpack at some other time. That's huge right there. I mean, yeah, if we're going towards a reality where we are telepathically linked, which I think you were talking just about that one experience with your wife, and it's true, and I know from stories that people who do this just tend to be much more open because they have exercised that muscle, so to speak, that brings in information. Yeah, you can't lie anymore. Imagine if we lived in that place, how clear things would start to become. People who needed to or wanted to lie would, I mean, they would be very quickly marginalized. All right, and welcome to another episode of Paradigms Lost and Found. And we are here again with Jim Rodger, who we had last time, talking about a variety of different things, including CE5 experiences and remote viewing, all kinds of different things he's been involved with. Jim produced many shows, public access TV shows, directed and also produced them when he was in Arizona. Is that right, Jim?
That's right. Uh-huh.
And one was called Cutting Edge, Revealing the Truth. The other one was called Off the Record, where he interviewed lots of luminaries in, I would say, the consciousness field, the UFO investigation field, alternative histories, whole bunch of other stuff. So we met not too long ago at a celebration of life, and it was a nice synchronicity for us to find each other because we share lots in common. And yeah, Jim, is there anything people can go back and watch the other thing. Was there anything you want to say about yourself, just generally, before we get into a little bit more detail on the topic of today's session, which is remote viewing?
Nothing super important. Just that what got me into this was curiosity. I knew that there was a component of our mind that is non-local because I was interacting with UFOs and stuff, and then that taught me, it trained me that we are more than just a local brain. There is a non-local aspect to our consciousness.
Indeed, and we'll scratch that itch a little bit more here before we get too far down the road. But let me ask you, how did you first find out about remote viewing? When and how?
I was listening to some of the all-night radio shows when I lived out west in Arizona, and I've heard, well, Robert Monroe had something to do with it. Then there was Courtney Brown. There was quite a few that came on, and I knew that, and I was already convinced that about the non-local aspects of our consciousness before I heard what they had to say, and they made it even more interesting to me.
So you started with your own kind of internal experience, and some of which we talked about last time, about non-local consciousness, and then what happened? So you got interested, and then what happened?
Yeah, I heard about I lived in Tucson at the time. No, actually, I lived in Wilcox at the time, and I heard about a course that was becoming available in Tucson. The course was in Tucson, so that's about a 90-mile drive back and forth every day. And the course I took lasted about a full week. And I promised my wife that that I would learn it well enough to bring it home and teach her what I learned. And I did, because we didn't have enough money for both of us to take this course at the time. So I did. I was a good student. I took a lot of notes, brought it all home. Then I trained her, and then some of the other family members wanted to get in on it. So I started training other members in the family, and some of their friends heard about it. So it just snowballed.
Wonderful. So just for those who may be new to this field, what is remote viewing in a capsule?
Yeah. Remote viewing is the ability to perceive any person, place, or thing or event anywhere in time or space, and to be perceived in a way with a constant stream of data. Whereas psychic phenomena is different. Psychic phenomena is like a movie clip. You see a 5-second vision of something that's happened or gonna happen, and that's psychic phenomena. But remote viewing is a controlled method of perceiving information and data from, like I say, from any person, place, thing, or event anywhere in time or space.
And when you say it's a controlled method, what does that mean?
Well, we use protocols designed kind of like a roadmap-like procedure, where you use the same procedure every time. You get so used to using that procedure that you don't even have to think about what you're doing, because it becomes second nature to you. So if you have to stop and think about how you're supposed to be using the protocols in the middle of a session, you've blown it. It's gone. Forget it. So you have to learn. You have to know be familiar with and to know the protocols well enough just to go right through them without having to stop and think about what should I be doing here. Oh, am I supposed to be doing that over there or this over there? So you really have to know them well, and that's what makes it all work.
Okay, so you made mention of the things that can be perceived. Can you say more about that for those who might never have heard of remote viewing? What is a target, or what can a target be? And can you give us some examples?
Yeah, like I say, a target can be like any person, place, thing, or event, past, present, or future. And let's see, we usually connect. Let's say you want to remote view. For example, I'll say the Kennedy assassination, just as a wild thing here. What you do is you take the Kennedy assassination. That's an event, so you write event, the time, and the date, and that's what you're going to go after. And you would attach coordinates. When I say coordinates, I mean a numerical. It can be an alphanumerical. It can be all letters or all numbers or a combination of both. It doesn't really matter. But you attach what do you call it? I can't think of the word. I just can't think of the word. I'm sorry, my brain is tired today.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, so now you say you, but you don't mean the reviewer is doing the target. You're really talking about somebody setting up a target, not the viewer, because there's a rule, right? And that the viewer has no idea what they're viewing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I meant the word I couldn't think of was coordinates.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yes.
You you come up with some random coordinates. And what I'll do, the way I'll usually do that is I'll take a calculator, I'll hold it in my hand, and I'll not look at it, and just scramble up the keys. And usually the first 4 digits is what I'll use. And I use 2 sets of 4 digits. That's 8 digits total. So I'll have a 4-digit number and another one below it, and they're all random numbers. And you connect those coordinates to the target that you want to view, and that's done by the creator of the target. And then that target can then be given to a remote viewer blindly. The remote viewer would blindly work the target usually, and there you come up with unbiased data, because they really don't know what they're working on in the beginning. And so there's no bias there, and the information is pure and honest.
And what is it that people are picking up? Are they actually picking up whole images, or are they picking up something different, or can it be all kinds of things?
Yeah, it can be images. You can the 5 senses become involved. You can taste, see, hear, smell. All of these senses can become involved in a remote viewing target, and it's not uncommon at all for that to happen.
What are can you recall any unusual targets that either you were given and discovered something that you wouldn't have known otherwise, or that it would have been difficult to find out through any kind of 3D research? Remember?
Yeah, there's been a few. I was working on some blind targets myself as a viewer, and there was one where this airplane was flying over the ocean, and the aircraft, it looked like a big 747, and the aircraft was continuously being harassed in air by a UFO, buzzing it. And so I logged and all the stuff down, wrote it down, and on the protocols, and lo and behold, when I completed the target, it was that Japanese cargo airliner about 10 or 15 years ago now. It was en route from Tokyo to California, and it was over the Alaskan coast, I think, when all of this stuff happened. But it's pretty interesting. Like I did when I was training my family early on. My daughter, they were doing the Kennedy assassination, and my daughter, and they were all doing this blindly. And my daughter drew this picture of a picket fence, all the pickets, and you can see these puffs of smoke coming out from between the pickets. This was the Kennedy assassination. So
no, there was only one shooter, Jim. One shooter.
That's what they tell us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, let's dial back the history here and just talk a little bit about when remote viewing started. Do you, not perhaps, in the more formal version that I think that we commonly recognized,
it was back. Yeah, it was back in, let me, the dates here. You see, my good friend, Jim Mars, who's no longer with us now, he broke the story on Nightline, the ABC Nightline TV program, on November 28th, 1995. And they, remote viewing, actually, the government program that all the famous remote viewers that we know of were involved with, Joe McMoneagle, Lynn Buchanan, Paul Smith, Ed Dames. There's a bunch of them. This all started, it lasted for 20 years. And I'm trying to remember the date. Let me see if I can find the actual date here.
Wasn't it sometime in the 80s?
Yeah, it was
late 70s, early 80s, somewhere, or mid 80s.
Yeah, and Anyways, the government invested over $20 million to this. And most of this, a lot of this stuff happened down at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and with the Army. And a lot of these guys, they were most of them were officers that were involved with the program, and they had very strict protocols. And I heard, now you might be able to help with this. I heard that all of the military remote viewers, with them, there was a prerequisite that they had to attend the Monroe Institute before they would go into service as a remote viewer. You know, so I don't know if that's
I can't really verify that, although it's interesting, and you've probably seen some, quote unquote whistleblower reports that have really made me chuckle, really, about the remote HemiSync and the remote, this big, quasi revelation, but it wasn't really being kept a secret. Now, I started working at the Institute in 1986, and I think it was pretty much then when Joe McMoneagle, who was Stargate remote viewer number 1, who had married Bob and Rose's stepdaughter, and he was there all the time. I mean, they lived, in the compound in the Monroe Institute, large property there in Central Virginia, and he would come in on Thursday nights, typically, which was, I think, the last night of the program, and wow us with his stories about remote viewing, teach us a little bit about what it was, give us some demonstrations, some examples from some of the views that he did. He's got some really good videos on YouTube now if anyone wants to check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes. But so that was 86, and I left there in 92, and he was still there. I know that the person who took over the running of the lab while I was there was a CIA guy, an officer type guy. I think he might have started in the Army. And so, it's not out of the realm, the possibility that they came there and the whole HemiSync technology itself, which I know you're familiar with, but for those who are not, is just a sound. Well, I don't want to say it's just, but it's a sound-based technology that was developed over a number of years that uses slightly different tones in each ear, combinations really, so that certain brainwave patterns are induced. But like you said, you have to kind of go through the process that they teach, which I think it was called the preparatory process. It was toning. It was an affirmation. This is not in any order. The energy conversion box, which was just kind of where to throw your stray thoughts. Progressive relaxation, right down to focus 10. Some combination, if I recall, some version of that. So the idea was that you're preparing yourself. You're shutting out the outside world and what just happened. You're going into a very highly relaxed state of consciousness in which you are then open to intuitive information, which in the Monroe Institute system was called Focus 12, so specific frequencies that were related to more intuitive information. So I'm guessing that's where they went, but I don't really know the full backstory relative to the early, because I'm not sure when Bob started his stuff, but I know that in 1978, I think it was, I had already read his first book, so that had been out at least for a few years by then. So it's likely that you're correct, that that may be correct, that they went through the Institute. Because why not? I mean, it was a whole system getting them ready to do that. Although I never met them except for Joe and the other guy who took over the lab, whose name I won't mention. But anyway, that's fascinating. We're kind of there, and I mean, they weren't hiding it. I mean, nobody was hiding it. It wasn't. At that point, I don't know if it had been. I guess it probably hadn't been specifically declassified or not, the nature of the program. But Joe talked about it anyway. At least in very general terms, telling us kind of, what they were doing. And, part of it came out into being, I'm sure, in response to intel that the Russians were doing this. I think you might have mentioned this last time, in fact. And so not to be, caught flat-footed. Let's do this ourselves. And so, Joe had mentioned that the, targets were obviously Soviet Union targets, military targets kind of stuff. So tell us about this place we think there's a submarine being built there, that kind of stuff. And, there's no, the cool thing about remote viewing is there's no limit that we know of. You can be inside a Faraday cage and you can still go out and view. Is that correct?
That's correct. By the way, you mentioned the Russians. They had a budget for a remote viewing budget, and it was about it was low. It was about 30 million rubles per year. And all of a sudden, through our intelligence, we found out that their remote viewing or the psychic spying budget jumped up to 300 million rubles per year. So our country became very alarmed. Our CIA did. And that's what precipitated us getting into that. And it did start in 1975, and it ran until 1995. And some of the stories I heard, that there were high-ranking government officials had these pet projects they wanted remote viewed, and they kept interfering with the project. So they said, the heck with it. They scrubbed it. But, personally, I think they're probably using outside contractors.
I find it very hard to believe that they would give up on any kind of advantage, and this is certainly an advantage, for people looking at this. So can you talk a little bit about some of the early programs in which the targets? I mean, we've talked about targets that you couldn't know about from a 3D perspective, like what's in Russia or who killed JFK, but the early programs had this thing called an outbound program, and this was, I think, when they were working with Stanford Research Institute. I think it was it was CIA and Stanford Research Institute. Monroe Institute, I guess, was involved in some way, and they had an outbound team, right? That would they would give the target, which would be like coordinates, like you were saying, to the viewer, who would know what it was. That viewer, I think most of them were men, would go in and start assessing the target, and then the outbound team would be right. They would be driving to the target, and they would get there, and there would be like this pretty much instantaneous confirmation of, the guy got it, or we don't know what the guy is talking about, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, Joe McMoneagle did a lot of that. I didn't do any of the outside stuff like that. There was everything that I've been involved with is just protocol type remote.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was just more early proof of concept stuff. So because people didn't believe it. I mean, they wouldn't believe it. Very highly placed people were highly skeptical of anything, that it would come to anything. And even when they were shown things, they're like, nah, that can't be anything. But the outbound program at least was able to satisfy the need to have 3D verification, after which, I mean, it's always good to get 3D verification. I think Joe talks about that, when you can. It's not always possible, but I mean, it comes down to the question that people will ask: is it provable? Can you prove that this thing works?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, first of all, in training is the student has to understand and believe about the non-local aspects of their consciousness. And one of the things I do to help them get past that point or get beyond that point is there's a little 5-minute cartoon on YouTube, and it's called Dr. Quantum. And it's all about the double slit experiment. How when the electrons going through this plate with two slits in them, it acts like a wave pattern. So even though it's going through two slits, the board behind the slits, you get these 5 different patterns on the screen behind it. Now, as soon as the experiment is watched with human consciousness, it breaks that down instantly into two slits. What's on the board behind the two slits. So every time the experiment is observed with human consciousness without failure, every single time human consciousness alters the experiment. And to me, this was one of the early breakthroughs in science, where some people call it science and spirituality coming together. or the psychic side coming to meet up with science with some verifiable data. And so I use that example, and I show people that little cartoon, because that is hard science. That is hard science. So when every time the experiment is observed, it alters the experiment every single time. So once they're convinced of the non-local aspects of their consciousness, we move on and start talking about protocols and stuff like that and how they work, blah, 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 and so forth.
So we talked a little bit last time about, what the potential is of remote viewing, in the sense that undertaken, with an attitude of serving humanity, serving creation. It can be a very powerful force for human evolution. Were you able to, as you taught people and encountered it yourself, were you able to see transformations in the way people felt about themselves, felt about life in general and their outlook?
Absolutely. That's what spurred me on and to continue teaching this stuff. And it's when a person learns to remote view, they find out often for the first time in their life that they really, honestly, and truly are connected to all things throughout this universe. So we are all connected. And the first time when I was in the school, the first time I really connected with some hard data that there was no other way to obtain it. And yeah, it was a moving moment with me. The tears just rolled down my cheeks. I said, "This is so beautiful," and I realized that we are all connected. So it does alter a person's worldview or their viewpoint of the universe as well, I think. You know,
Yeah, and we know from different people on doing this, that anything, like you said, can be targeted. Doesn't have to be on this planet, doesn't have to be in this time frame, doesn't even have to be necessarily in this dimension. I remember a friend of mine who was, after coming to Monroe Institute, developed her own set of protocols, a really sharp woman from Canada. And one of the targets that somebody had set for her, I think, was Princess Diana right after she died.
yeah, I think we did that target a long time ago. I don't have it was so long ago. I don't have the data in front of me, but it was pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, and here's another interesting thing is that different people with different personalities come from different aspects of life. Somebody might be a pipe fitter, an electrician, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, and they all might look at the same target from a different point of view, and coming up with true and accurate data, but from a different point of view. And that's the beauty of it when you have people from all different walks of life, so to speak, coming up with the data, then you have a more well-rounded sampling of data. Yeah.
Well, and it suggests to me kind of an evolution of consciousness among humans, where we can understand and appreciate that kind of multi-perspectival framing. Like, it's not just what I pick up or what I think, but it's what's real is really more of a result of what we collectively can tune into. And if we are tuning into things without bias, that seems to be the huge challenge today. It's like, I look around and I go, how is this reality going to change? If we look at the misconceptions right now that are rampant on the planet about almost anything you can imagine, whether it's, climate or the economy or COVID or it's like the misconceptions are so huge. And of course, the people on the other side believe that, we're the crazy ones, but be that as it may, it seems to me that this kind of skill set, I'll call it a skill set, could be very useful in being able to present information in a way that is, mostly free of bias. Recognizing, of course, we all still have our inherent biases, and when the information comes out of the the purely perceptual and enters into our analytical self, we're obviously going to have some thoughts about it. But it would seem to me, and at least that here's something that can be tested and can be trusted as a process to present or access information that is not normally accessible. And I don't see any reason why that couldn't be then merged with information that we're getting from the 3D world, to create a better picture. I think of Farsight Prime. That's what is it, Corey? What's his last name? I'm forgetting now. The Farsight channel on YouTube. Who, they're looking at. They do all kinds of targets, but they also do. They have like a whole group of people who are actively working, the same targets, and they'll do one after the other, and they'll have this drawing board where you essentially they're representing what it is they're seeing, the relationship among the different elements. See a river here, a building's there, no windows or people running around. The level of detail, can be really phenomenal, and a lot of them end up sharing it. They also will do predictive things like what's coming in the coming month. What big things are coming, and then they get to look at that. And here's an issue that some people have talked about. I know my friend who had developed her protocols felt that when 2 or more people were viewing a target, it became possible to have some interference between the viewers.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
That's true. After I'll give you an example of that. After I trained my wife in remote viewing, I'm a ham radio operator, so I had a little building out away from the house where all my radio equipment was, and so I would work out there, and I was all alone. It was quiet. It was peaceful. Of course, the radio stuff was all turned off, and my wife was working in the house on a different target. I think it was something to do with the Roswell crash over there in New Mexico. And anyways, I forget, but this is so long ago, but I forget what I was working on. But I remember we logged, this is crazy, we logged each other's data.
Really?
Yeah, it just totally blew us away.
Wow.
And I can't explain how that happened, but there was obviously a very strong telepathic connection there.
Sure. Well, you would have had a pre-existing one in any case through your relationship. But I think what she was concerned about, and I haven't really seen this talked about elsewhere. It's not that they don't, but I just haven't seen it. And with other viewers, and there are quite a few viewers out and about, and people can just go on YouTube and find a lot of them, including some of the ones you mentioned are still at it. But she would say that if that the analysis that one would ultimately come out with could get somehow stuck to the target. In which case, her concern was: were you seeing the target, or were you seeing somebody else's view of the target?
Right. And when a doubt like that comes into your mind during a session, what we call it, you AOL it, you get analog, we call it an analog overlay. It may be true, it may not be true, but you want to dump it to get it out of the way so you can proceed, you can continue on.
Keep going, right?
Because when something like that keeps popping up in your mind in the middle of a session, you've got to stop that because it's holding up the rest of the data flow.
Yep. So can anybody learn remote viewing?
Yeah, remote viewing is an ability that almost everyone, except for maybe someone with some mental defect for whatever reason, I don't know, but it's almost anyone can do this. It's like it's a dormant ability. It's like a car out in the backyard that hasn't been started or ran for a while. Well, you might need to jump start it to get it going, and after that, it's just fine. And that's the way it goes with remote viewing. It's a dormant ability. You probably, I don't know, probably 90% of all people have this ability, but it's dormant. They don't use it. They don't know about it. The things, different aspects of our society tell them, oh, no, this is taboo. Stay away from this. Or for whatever reason, people are steered away from this, Uh, see, I had a slide. I had something over here. I was looking at it. I can't find it, but it doesn't matter. So, you've got religion, science said, no, this can't be true for many years. Now they're beginning to to take a good hard look at it. Religion and science and academia too uh, said this isn't true. It doesn't work. Whatever. Until they started trying it and using it.
Exactly. And I assume, like anything else, this can be misused.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, I'm assuming like other powerful tools, remote viewing can be misused or abused.
Yeah, and the good thing is, if everybody on Earth was a skilled remote viewer, lying would be impossible. Lying on this planet would be impossible.
Boom. Well, that's something we can unpack at some other time. That's huge right there. I mean, yeah, if we're going towards a reality where we are telepathically linked, which I think, you were talking, just about that one experience with your wife, and, it's true. And I know from stories that people who do this just tend to be much more open because they have exercised that muscle, so to speak, that brings in information. Yeah, you can't lie anymore. Imagine if we lived in that place, how clear things would start to become. And people who needed to or wanted to lie they would be very quickly marginalized, because it would be like a big red,
Yeah.
Red Rudolph nose or something.
There's a scripture in the Bible, in the book of Psalms, that says, may you constantly be found in prayer and meditation. Well, if you're praying, aren't you requesting? You're transmitting, you're sending out a request. And if you're meditating, you're receiving. And so most of the religions said, well, this is taboo, but they overlooked that command from the Bible.
Yeah. It's important to understand, like anything else, we really need to be aligned to the best benefit of humanity and spirit to do this kind of work, or I believe that it rebounds badly on us when we start to go into these areas, and if we're not clear, serious implications. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the training that you've done, and maybe we'll do again here if we can work up the interest.
Yeah, I learned it, remote viewing, in 1997. Brought it home. I started teaching it to the family because they all wanted to know. And like I say, I was a good student. I took a lot of notes and so forth. And then other people were asking me about it. Then I just started doing it. So three or four, maybe 5 times a year. I had seminars, and I designed it and set it up because most people are working. I could teach them enough to get them started, and the rest of it would be up to them. And if they had any questions or anything, I would always be available. And I always thought it would be good if we could form a group of people and get them up to speed and skilled in this, and then we could work on all of these different projects. It would be so fascinating. What there would be no limits, literally.
Exactly. So
the thing is, most people were so busy with their everyday affairs of life that it was difficult to do that. But that's what I really wanted to do at the time. Yeah.
So the workshop you would do was it Friday night, Saturday, Sunday kind of thing, or
Yeah,
what?
yeah, it was all weekend.
Yep. So
The
full.
Friday night was mostly, well, we would have like a little social type of get together on a Friday evening, maybe some coffee, tea, and cookies or something like that, and get familiar with each other so we'd be comfortable working together for the rest of the weekend. And I would discuss the history, the origins of remote viewing. It really goes back a lot farther than, excuse me, it really goes back a lot farther than modern times, actually.
Sure.
And I would do some uh, telepathic exercises. Well, first of all, I'd show them how to quiet down their conscious mind. That's one of the most important things. You have to be uh, relaxed. You don't want to eat or drink any food that's going to stimulate you, like too much coffee or anything like that. You want to be awake, alert, but completely relaxed. The ideal situation to enter a remote viewing session. And anyways, I would do all of these things on the first half of the Saturday, and in the afternoon, I would bring out the protocols and go through them, the different stages in the protocols, and really try to get them familiar with it so they know what to do when we go for that first training target. And usually I would pick training targets that were um, major events in history that left strong impressions uh, for training purposes. And it seemed to work pretty well. And then we the rest of the day we spent uh, really becoming familiar with the protocols because it's so important. Like as I mentioned earlier, you have to become so familiar with those protocols that you can just shoot right through them. You know what you're doing. You don't have to stop and think because that's what makes it work. And then at the end of the Saturday, the first day, I would uh, give them all a first target, and that's when that's when you see amazing things. People just get totally blown away. Like one time, I did I printed a copy of a map, and it was Oak Island up in Nova Scotia, where the so-called treasures is hidden. And so I gave them a map of that, but they didn't know what they were looking at because there were no names on the map, no identification whatsoever. So I had them all mark as part of the target. I had them all mark a spot on the map where the treasure being the target, where the main point of interest is, where the target is on the map. And what was amazing, I think there were 6 of them in this group, small group. And when they were all done, I had them put their initials on the map, and I took all the maps, I held them up to the window where the sun was shining in, and all the X's on the maps fell extremely closely, like within a bullseye.
Now
So
that's some confirmation right there.
yeah,
Yep. Indeed. Indeed.
and it's a lot of fun. It's like watching a little kid on Christmas morning when they light up and they realize, wow, this is amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. So you had mentioned to me that you have a kind of an introductory sort of, little presentation that you sometimes do. I'm assuming it's not the same thing you would do for the Friday night or Saturday thing. Is
No,
that
no, it's a PowerPoint presentation, and I call it the mechanics of remote viewing. So if anybody's interested in it, excuse me, they'll know how, or they'll at least understand how and why it works. And it's an introductory type thing. It's probably about a 1 hour long talk, and
Okay.
I can plug it into a projector or plug it into a big screen TV, either way, and do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so yeah, we'll keep talking about this, and I'll be sharing this podcast around to people who are interested, and hopefully sometime later in the fall or maybe early next year, depending on what the timing ends up being for everybody, we can get a group going.
Yeah, I like to also doing remote viewing targets. It's like mental gymnastics too, in some ways. After you finish a target, you need to take a little break, refresh your mind, walk around a little bit or something, and before you would even think about going into another target. And so I do that. We take a lot. We take a lot of breaks, especially on Sunday, the second day, and also I teach them timelining, past, present, future, and there's a way to narrow these times down, and I teach that. I call it timelining. Uh, let's see. This looking here. Timelining, uh, mind probing, map vectoring, stuff like that. We do at the end of it, and from there, that is what gives um, a student enough to roll with, enough to get them going. And if they practice it on a regular basis, there's only one way they can go. It's up and up and up with it, better and better and better.
Well, I have certainly been impressed by what I've learned about it over the years, and the small bit that I've was practicing it. It's been a while, so I would look forward to getting more tutelage on bringing that skill set back. And yeah, it's just opening another door, and the fact that you like you had said, it leads to an understanding of our unlimited potential, who we are as consciousness, and who we can be as individuals and as a society and a civilization, especially at this critical time where the common pillars, the things that we used to rely on for truth and wisdom are breaking down, and we're seeing that kind of the emperor's got no clothes, and a lot of us have some pretty good critical thinking skills in this community, but I think what we're talking about here is like the next level beyond that, where it's not a function of cogitation; it's more a function of perception, and where that can take us when we enter into, I guess what I'll call, enter into an active quest, or sometimes what I call a quest for emergence. The word question is question. I'm on a quest. It's a way to engage one's own consciousness and move to another place through it. So it's very exciting. I just I'm looking forward to seeing what we might be able to do and learn together. And I very much like your idea of kind of having a group of people who practice this and set targets, and it can be used for anything absolutely under the sun. Technology, social questions, personal questions, find out about, history, ancient history, what's really going on with a current event. It's really wild. So yeah, I'm looking forward. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close out?
Yeah. There's just one other point that in the beginning, when I first learned remote viewing, I didn't know about, and as a few years went on, I found out that there's a place out in Palo Alto, California, called Cognitive Sciences Institute, I think it's called, and they discovered that there is an optimum time for remote viewing or any other type of psychic endeavor.
Yes.
And that is based upon uh, uh, local sidereal time. In other words, our solar system, our planet revolves around the sun. Our sun is revolving around the galaxy. and everything in existence rotates, everything. And so there is a time when your position on the Earth, if it is facing the center of the galaxy, there's a noise, there's an interference pattern, and it interferes with remote viewing. It interferes with any other type of site activity. And there's a way, there's a computer where you enter the time of day, where you are on the planet, and it'll show you where you are on that curve. You may or may not want to do remote viewing at the time based upon that information. And I teach them how to use that as well. So that's important.
Okay. Sounds like we're opening up a completely new, treasure quest of some kind. It's like, yeah, it's you gotta take the journey to know where it's going. So, well, listen, Jim, I thank you for your time today and for clarifying this and for being willing to bring it back to the community sometime in the future. And we'll keep talking about it, and we'll let people know when something gets set up. So I appreciate you.
Sounds good.